My wife's mother and father.
All set? All right. Good morning. I'm Vern Tepe. It's now 9 o'clock.
Starting. So
Hereby
I
call to
wanted
order
to
the
let you
public
know
service.
what I'm up to.
Davis, would you please mute yourself? Thank you. I hereby call to order the public service meeting. May we have a roll call?
Brown,
Brown here.
Leonard,
Leonard here.
Lewis, Shepro, Surgis, Kopi, Tepe.
Tepe here.
We do not have quorum.
Hmm.
2, 3.
No, I don't think we have anything to vote on except for reports and minutes, so we will delay those to the next meeting.
Madam Chair Pirog is here.
Can you hear me?
What was that?
Who was that?
Madam Chair?
Oh, yes. Can you hear me? I'm calling
Yes,
via
there
phone.
you
I'm
are.
about 5 minutes out. Hi, good morning.
Okay. Any public comment? All right, let's start off with finance.
Good morning. Michael Kilborn here, giving the treasury report, which is on file. But I would like to report that we have completed this cycle of tax collections. That was the final part of it was done on October 31st with the tax sale. And I paused briefly when I said the final part because actually tomorrow is our last distribution. So tax collection is done. The last distribution goes out tomorrow. And the office is already in process to start working on the next cycle as it comes up. I'd like to thank everyone. It's been a pleasure working with you. As you know, I'm out December 1st, so it's been an honor and a privilege to be in front of you and working for the residents of Kane County.
It's a bittersweet time to say goodbye to you because I think you've done an excellent job. So thank you for your service and enjoy your second retirement.
Thank you. And really, it's the people in the office that did the work before me and continue to do the work, and they'll be here after December 1st. They make the electeds look good. So thank you very much.
Okay, so the recorder isn't here, treasurer, supervisor assessments. Mark, good morning.
Good morning, everyone. My report begins on, oh wait, the new page numbers are not numbered. Okay, the report's in the packet on a page. There's a lot of charts in there, a lot of data. But in the interest of time and recognizing the lack of a quorum, I'm happy to let the report simply be submitted as drafted unless anyone has any questions.
No questions?
And then Mr. Chairman, I also had a response to something that you had contacted me about yesterday, and I'm not sure where you want that to be. So whenever you're ready, I'd be happy to proceed with that.
Why don't we put that under other business? so
Very
that,
good.
We can get everything else taken care of, so. Regional Office of Education, good morning.
Good morning. Today I have with me Jimmy Paola, who is our liaison for homeless students in Kane County. And I thought we would just spend a couple minutes talking a little bit about what that means and how we serve those children.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jimmy Pavola. I work for the Kane County ROE, obviously, as the McKinney-Vento liaison. First and foremost, I advocate for students that are experiencing homelessness and then also the McKinney-Vento law. What the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act does is it basically creates a set of inalienable rights for students that are experiencing homelessness. Some of those rights look like immediate enrollment without records or documentation, a right to transportation, and a right to remain in your school of origin if you were to lose housing during a school year. Right now in Kane County, we are seeing our numbers grow a little bit after COVID. COVID kind of served a little bit as a data anomaly for us because students, as we moved into more of a virtual classroom type style, students that were experiencing homelessness, they kind of just dropped off and identification kind of fell off. What we have seen is our numbers have started to grow back and they're actually starting to get a little bit larger. Last year, at the end of the school year, we had around 2,000 students in Kane County served by our 9 school districts that are McKinney-Vento eligible or experiencing housing insecurity or homeless. Just through this first quarter alone, we have 1,600 students. So we expect that number to continue to grow as the school year goes on and people obviously become identified more and more. A few of the things that I do is number one, like I said, I advocate for students. Secondly, I operate a grant that helps students with basic needs, such as school clothes, school supplies, anything that will give them equal access to education. That grant is funded by ISB and then also the McKinney-Vento Act. Another big project that I'm working on right now is therapy. Students basically are having a lot of, mental health crises concerning, number one, the pandemic, number two, obviously homelessness causes trauma. So we actually offer 2 different programs here in Kane County. I've partnered with a therapist in Elgin and St. Charles, which is Rally Point Therapy, where we actually cover up to 10 sessions of therapy for those students, sometimes more if needed. It's a case-by-case basis. I have also partnered with the Joliet ROE, or Will County ROE, excuse me, and they have a teletherapy program that we use as well too. Another program that we're working on right now is obviously getting students winter clothes. Is there any questions?
Yes, okay. One, you mentioned you partnered with organizations to provide some mental health services. Have you also dealt with Family Service Association?
Yes.
Okay, are they working with you?
Not directly, but they are part of IRIS, and I do provide referrals to that if they can't fit into one of our programs.
Okay. Are there any resources that we could help you with or could help you get?
Housing is going to be the biggest issue right now. I'm sure I actually sat on the Affordable Housing Summit panel here in Kane County a few months back. I've participated on several community advisory panels. The number one need right now in Kane County is affordable housing in my eyes. Food insecurity is another big one, but I was looking at the data from Kane County's 211, and I believe it was close to 70% of their calls through, I think it was last quarter, were all about housing. So I do understand that this is an issue that is hard to work on, but I would say this is the number one thing right now that's kind of affecting families that are experiencing homelessness in Kane County.
Yeah, it's not a problem that can be solved. It's a problem that can be alleviated.
Absolutely.
And then does your number of, as you said, 1,600 now, does that include people that are couch surfing or as much as you know?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. And that's actually a great question. HUD's definition of homelessness is actually much different than McKinney-Vento's definition. So McKinney-Vento's definition counts people that are couch surfing, or we call doubled up. And then also people that are staying in hotels, which some of HUD's housing programs don't necessarily look at as being literally homeless.
Yeah. Well, if you need any help with Family Service Association, let me know.
Absolutely.
Help you there.
Thank you, sir.
Any other
Mr. Chair,
questions? Yes.
I've just got a comment here, a thought as I'm listening to everything else that's going on. And then circling back to Mr. Armstrong, and the fact that we don't have a quorum at this meeting, and I'm not going to be sitting here in a month. And I think what Mr. Armstrong has got to say is very important for decisions going forward. So I'm wondering really, since other than you and Bill that are on this committee and Mike is here, if maybe that discussion shouldn't be held off until you've got a new committee that needs to hear what he's got to say.
Well, the key thing was merely just to start the discussion.
I
Okay.
understand, and it's your decision, but I'm just, there's nobody to hear the discussion is what I'm saying, that's going to be here to make the decisions.
Well, we do get recorded.
True. Okay.
We do get recorded, so.
Davis is online. He should be part of that.
Chepro's online but doesn't know how to unmute himself.
He's a god.
She doesn't count. Does she count? Does Madam Chair count?
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
and I'm outside the building. I'm here and I'm listening attentively. And we need to continue to address those students because what happens to the students is going to impact Kings County well-being long-term. And I'm going to turn the
Jepro's
phone
here,
off
too.
because I think you can hear the blowers. I'll see you in a minute.
Thank you, but Mr. Shepro's online, so we now have a quorum. Thank you, Mr. Shepro.
Thank you.
May I have a unanimous motion for the approval of the minutes for October 20th, 2022?
Leonard,
So
so moves.
requested.
Okay, Mr. Leonard moves. Any objection? Thank you. We're actually conducting business. Okay, Veterans Assistance. Good morning.
Good morning. I have nothing earth shattering to report today, so just basically our average days pending for claims fiscal year to date remain high, although we're doing better than average on both compensation and pension claims by about a month. Our claims inventory remains high, higher than it has been for the whole year, but we're managing that fairly well. And we've brought in almost $5.3 million in new benefits this year that goes directly into veterans' pockets here in Kane County. We're gearing up for a new life insurance program the VA is going to be rolling out in the beginning of January. They'll also be sunsetting one of their legacy programs. And we're back to our pre-pandemic outreach events where we go to the Aurora American Legion once a month, the Elgin American Legion once a month, and then the combined St. Charles Veterans posts once a month as well. I have nothing additionally to report, but I'd be happy to take any questions.
Yeah, any questions? Now that we're legal? Okay, thank you, Jake. County Clerk, anything going on there?
Nah, nothing. Good morning. Briefly before I start, our office wanted to thank Treasurer Kilborn for his work. And, we're all part of this team with the supervisor assessments and getting the tax bills out and that whole long process that no one wants to hear about. So thank you for your work the last couple of years and making sure, we're all together and getting the tax bills out on time for the people of Kane County. So thank you. For the monthly report, you see where we're at. We're ahead of last year, always a good thing. We like to look at the bottom line. We've brought $1,156,000 to the general fund. And so, as you guys make those tough decisions on budget things, we're doing our job to make sure we're bringing money back to you. You'll see, passport numbers. Thanks to Kane County Connects for doing the story on passports. As you can see, based on the report in terms of numbers of passports, as well as the revenue generated from it, we're waiting on the last 2 months, but we're probably gonna have a record year for passports. So people are traveling. It's great. And as a reminder, we're here. Not only do we handle the acceptance side, we do the passport photos as well. So one-stop shop, and we're open late on Wednesdays. So for people that are looking, it's probably a little bit late to travel for the holidays now to get a passport. But if you're looking for travel into the spring and summer of next year, come on in and get them. With regard to elections, yeah, we did that thing. We'll be putting the November election to bed next week with the final canvass. The potential 2 other elections that are getting ready to go on right now, candidates that may be running in a February consolidated primary will be filing beginning next week, not here, but at local LEOs. And then candidates filing for the April consolidated election will be filing in December. So that's going on. Tax redemptions. Since the tax sale happened, we had a big flurry of activity for residents coming in to redeem their property taxes. We're starting our work on tax extension. We'll be handling that in December as those levies come in. I think we did have our first electronic filing already. So that law was changed last year. So that's going to make things a lot easier. The taxing bodies can file their levies electronically. talked about passports, marriage licenses. We've had a lot of those this year. So people that are looking to get married during the holidays, that's another popular time. Those marriage licenses are valid for 60 days. So come on in now. Don't wait till the last minute. And then one other thing, I guess I'll give you a little tease. I can't talk about it till next week. It's embargoed till the 23rd, but the clerk's office is going to be getting some national recognition. So Clerk Cunningham said, if you want to know, come on over to the office. He can give you a little bit of a hint, but we'll probably be making an announcement. Thanksgiving week is probably not a great time for it, but it'll be announced next week. We'll talk about it a little bit more at the next meeting, but you'll be seeing a press release too. So some cool news. So
Does he need pictures and bios of the committee members?
of course, always a good thing. I mean, how can we do our job without the committee? So, yeah, I think that's it for now.
Okay, have there been any, or been many objections to the elections and issues associated with that? Or is that wait for the final filing?
Well, the canvas won't be done. So statute says 14 days for any vote by mails to come in, as well as so then the canvas won't be done until at the earliest next Tuesday. Usually the office does it right away to put that to bed. If there are any post-election issues, they would come after that point. I mean, we've had poll watchers throughout the entire process, watching as things have gone on, as ballots have come in. I mean, I guess people have made objections. You've heard about them and seen them, but in terms of the post-election stuff, no, that won't come until after the canvas.
Okay. Any other questions? Madam Chair.
Oh, I have a question for the treasurer. Should I wait for new business?
No, let's do it now.
All right.
Is your mic on?
Yes, it is. Good morning. I had the opportunity to watch a little bit of TV yesterday, which was great. And Marie Pappas, who is your position, I believe, in Cook County,
Yes, ma'am.
was talking about legislation that she's proposing in Springfield, and I don't know much about this. It's the tax sale. It's called the sale and error loophole. Are you familiar with that?
I'm familiar with the subject, but not what she is proposing at this point. I've not seen either brief or the actual law or the news article, so I'd have to look that up.
Do we have any such thing here in Kane County?
Well, we have a tax sale.
Yes, I understand that.
But I'm not sure that, and the loophole that I've heard about can be, it's possible in the state of Illinois, but I don't think that we've had that situation, certainly not large scale in Kane County, but I'll look up what she's proposing and respond to you in reference to that question.
And perhaps Mr. Tepe as well. And we may want to continue that discussion because there is legislation that it's probably going to be introduced next spring. Oh, yes.
Mark Armstrong here. I am familiar with what the Cook County Treasurer is proposing. It's to address an issue in Cook County where buyers of properties at tax sale are buying properties that cannot be taken to deed or have some other defect in the process, waiting until 3 years and then appealing to the courts for a sale and error to get the statutory interest back in addition to their original principal. It's an abuse of the system that happens in Cook County because of a couple of things that converge. One is the sheer number of parcels they have to deal with. 1.8 million as opposed to about 200,000 here in Kane County, countywide parcels. And you'd see an appurtenant increase in the number of parcels that go to tax sale each year. And with that number of parcels, it's hard to do the type of policing that we do here. The second thing that happens there is because of that, there's a lot of people who seek to take advantage of it. I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a property owned by a local government and the property has not applied for tax exempt status. By statute, I cannot grant tax exempt status to that property without an application. And for instance, for years, when we still had a public building commission, the public building commission declined to ever file a tax exempt application. So building C was taxed for years and years and years because the public building commission declined to do its job. And yes, I'm very specific about that. So if Kane County did not pay the tax, and the county made the choice to pay the tax at that time, if Kane County did not pay the tax, it would theoretically be a subject to tax sale. The trouble is there's also court decisions that say properties owned by governments cannot go to deed. So what our treasurer's office has done for decades is whenever something hits that confluence, before they get the order for judgment, they ask the court to remove those from the tax sale. And the court actually does that. That takes care of the issue. So what Cook County needs state legislation to do, we handle with a few ministerial acts, a signature from a judge, and everything is done very efficiently. And the problem that is described in Cook County simply doesn't exist here, again, because of the work of the staff of the treasurer's office.
Perfect.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Shepro.
Oh, well, that actually was Mr. Armstrong's full and lucid explanation of what I was going to offer on the issue of sale and error.
Okay, well, just wanted you
With
to know I had,
equally a degree of elegance, if I may say.
just wanted you to know I hadn't forgotten about you.
Thank you.
It's unclear whether Mr. Shepro's explanation would be longer or shorter than mine.
Oh, it's a toss-up. Oh, in this case, definitely shorter.
Oh.
Mr. Chair.
A lot of money on that.
We're not
But
going to
not
take a vote on that.
But not as
Mr. Brown.
informative.
Mr. Brown.
Brown speaking, back to the clerk's report. I just want to comment, I always enjoy looking at the spreadsheets that you put out, the data that's there. And I'm just going to mention again, I've mentioned it a few times, that it still appears as though the deaths in Kane County are continuing to increase and the births in Kane County are continuing to decrease. So we're having less people born and more people die year over year for the last 10 years. Just an interesting fact.
Okay.
If I can share perhaps reasons why, and that's happening throughout the United States and in other developing countries. As women have continued from the 1960s, when the average birth rate was about 6 kids. Now we're down to about 2. Costs have gone up. Women have become college graduates and have chosen, instead of staying home with children, and we all know, anybody who's raised children knows that they're wonderful, beautiful, and they take a lot of work. And they don't go away. They stay around. God bless them, which is exactly what we want to have. It's a family. But they do take effort and work. And the cost of having children going into daycare is oftentimes punitive. Right now, costing it about $20,000 to $25,000 annually per child. So having less children allows a family to financially succeed, with cost of housing rising, cost of everything rising for the last, 10 years. So that's probably why.
Mhm.
And there are 8 billion people now in the world. And that mark just came in, I think, Tuesday. So we've got, simply in my opinion, I think we got a full house. So it may be better for, I think everybody's doing okay. And certainly people can have
Shepro?
children if they so choose, and we welcome them.
Thank you.
Comment, Shepro?
Mr. Shepro.
I think I agree with what was just said, but it sort of sometimes depends on the country too. My wife has spent a good deal of time in Singapore years ago with her job. Singapore has the problem that Madam Chair alluded to, if you want to call it a problem, which is that university-educated women have fewer children. And Singapore viewed that as a problem because their population was shrinking below replacement rate. And they offered all sorts of incentives, apartments, tax breaks, so forth, in order to change that trend. And so far, they have not been successful. I point that out simply because, and of course, China has had a population control program that's rather punitive, again, because they wanted to limit their growth. But I think that for every woman that doesn't have those 6 kids, and boy, I don't know, I didn't know anybody like that when I was growing up, but we have replaced those kids with a whole new set of people in public life and business life that have enriched the country immensely. So
Thank you.
I
Right,
want just one comment about the election. I think this time, with all these poll watchers and pseudo poll watchers bumping into each other and tripping over each other, at least we should not have to listen to any more complaints about election fraud and so forth. And to Mr. Chair's, your question about the election, once the canvass is completed, any disgruntled candidates, not any, but anybody who has received 95% of the vote cast for the winner, may ask for a discovery if they wish to look into the totals. And there are a number of close races, but history would tell us that with the efficiencies of the clerk's office and the method of counting, it is extremely unlikely that even some of the close races would change. And personally, I don't imagine there will be any recount requests, with the possible exceptions of the Batavia school referendum.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Bates, please.
Ms. Bates.
About the poll watchers, and so a friend of mine is a election judge, I think in Batavia, and she said the poll watchers were bumping into her, like elbow to cheek and stuff like that, and she's probably going to quit being a judge because they were so aggressive. What can we do about that?
Prosecute the poll watchers.
We'll refer that to the county clerk. It's up to him, unfortunately, to unfortunately deal with those situations. And I know that that has continued to happen. Mr. Pollack, you want to comment on that?
I can comment on the election judges. We hope that doesn't happen. Our elections are run with and because of our election workers. We don't get to where we are without our judges, and we need them. Another plug, judges, please, for all of you as elected officials, if you can help us recruit, we're always looking. But the election judges are important with regard to any issues with poll watchers. Those are issues for the state's attorney's office. So if there were issues, hopefully those are reported to the state's attorney's office and the sheriff to be addressed.
May I, Mr. Chairman, with another question? Is that legal for them to be like within inches of the judges? Watching what they're writing down and things like that?
That's probably a longer discussion.
Okay.
Would be best talk to the clerk about that.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Pollack.
Comment, Shepro.
Mr. Shepro?
Yeah, I am aware of some of the, I don't know about bumping, but in theory, under the law, every candidate is entitled to have a poll watcher. And although what, as I understand, is paramount is that the polling place can function. But some polling places that are in small rooms, there were issues where it was difficult to accommodate the poll watchers' right to observe what was going on, and in some cases, Mavis, being written down with the exigencies of there's not enough room. And I know that there were, in every case I am aware of, and I received several complaints about it, the clerk's office very efficiently and would rearrange the room to ensure that the poll watchers' rights were respected. But to your friend's point and Mr. Teppi's observation, or Mr. Pollock's observation, somebody has to know that there was a violation before they can pursue it. So if she was in fact, deliberately bumped or whatever by an election poll watcher, she should make a complaint about it.
Okay, I'll talk to her.
In that vein, I do have one request of the clerk's office, and that is the registration form that you use when someone initially comes in and signs in is the same registration form that's used for the primaries. So that particular form is asking for party affiliation. And I've had at least one person come to me and say, they were asked for party affiliation. And when they asked the individual that was handling the form, they said, oh yeah, you have to fill that out. So my suggestion would be that you use a separate form that does not ask for party affiliation in the regular election.
Vern, are you asking about the poll watcher form or the voter wanting to vote form?
The voter wanting to vote form.
Ah, okay.
Okay, let's go on to, I've asked Mr. Armstrong to give us that we have a discussion about the senior freeze. And I know I've been the one leading the charge on this. And the logistics of it are that Social Security, at least in the past 2 years, has increased about a total of 15%, maybe even more than that. And people that are on the senior freeze, the household income has to be less than 65,000 in order for them to be eligible for it. And so I'm urging that it be raised. And we're working in conjunction with this, with the legislative committee too. And so since it was discussed there yesterday, and I asked Mr. Armstrong to give us a brief overview of the senior citizens assessment situation in our county.
Thank you very much. First thing to know about with the senior citizen assessment freeze homestead exemption, which by the way was this year renamed the low income senior citizen assessment freeze homestead exemption. SCAFE was the old acronym. It's going to have to be changed to LISCAFE, which means we probably need to come up with a better name to have a cooler acronym or something. But this is something that is done in state law. So, and I know, Mr. Chairman, you are already aware of this, but just for everyone else's certification, the county board has no role in this directly. In other words, there's nothing you can do to pass it that actually implements a change. The change has to come from the General Assembly. So a little bit of background, though, will help you understand that and what changes you might want to advocate. So the property tax extension limitation law was first implemented in 1994. So it's been around for nearly 30 years. Now, while it's an extension limitation law, that's an old slide. It's the senior assessment freeze. Now, when it says assessment freeze in the name of the act, it really does not freeze your assessment so much as it creates an exemption that takes away from taxable status any amount over what the base year is. So it it exempts any increases. So if your base year assessment is $60,000, your property goes to 90,000, you'll get a $30,000 exemption. Now, that exemption is going to be based on household income. Now, this is something we need to pay attention to because you have to understand exactly what it means. First thing is, what does it mean by household? That means the applicant, that's the senior citizen applying for the exemption, the applicant's spouse, and that is irrespective of the spouse's location. If the spouse lives elsewhere, that income must be counted. If there is a legal separation, it must be counted. If they haven't seen each other in 30 years but are still married, it must be counted. A divorce decree will end that. If for a divorce, it doesn't count, but any other situation, it does count. And then lastly, anyone else using the property as a principal dwelling as of January 1st of that taxable year. So it includes all those people. Now, what is household income? Well, household income starts with your adjusted gross income on the federal 1040. Depending on which form you file, that might be a little bit different number, but it's always identified as AGI. That's not your taxable income. That's your adjusted gross income, but that's only the starting point because there are also 8 other categories of untaxed income that have to be included, including Social Security benefits, which is, of course, one of the things that leads us to have this discussion today. So all of that has to be reported. It has to be included. Retirement benefits are not taxed in Illinois, but they are included in this definition, whether they're taxable or not. So what does it not include? There's very few things, but the biggest one is going to be veterans benefits. The forms for this come out every year because every year there is a new application that has to be made. You can find those forms at CaneCountyAssessments.org. You can see a copy of the income section of this form on the screen in front of you. See, it kind of looks like another tax return. This is what the General Assembly has said in that they have to give us these amounts. Now, for many years, this was the only thing that we allowed. We did make it easy for people to convert from their 1040s by providing this conversion chart. By the way, we were the first county in the state to do this. This is now available through various organizations statewide. It's still something that we put together every year in this county. To my right is Chief Deputy Holly Winter. This was her brainchild originally, so you have her to thank for that. So in doing that, there was the question of, are people honestly transferring the amounts from their 1040 to that form? And we probably think not always, sometimes not understanding, sometimes, let's just say stretching definitions. So for that part, an annual application is required. And since I think 2017, we've required your 1040 to be included in that. Why? Well, a good example is something I addressed just yesterday with a taxpayer. We received an application. The application said the household income was about $10,000. That would certainly qualify. But the tax return showed an adjusted gross income of more than $250,000. And the taxpayer reluctantly submitted that because it was required and accompanied with a letter of to why that, well, that income really shouldn't be considered. The thing is, that's what the statute is. The idea is to target low-income senior citizens, not other situations. Now, does that mean if a senior citizen has tons and tons of expenses that won't go into effect? That's exactly what it means. But those rules are set by the General Assembly. Now, those forms are exempt from any disclosure. They're not only exempt from disclosure, say, by FOIA, but it's also a misdemeanor if I were to share those. So say I had that application I discussed yesterday. If I were to bring that in, you could connect that application to a specific person. That would be a misdemeanor, and I certainly could be prosecuted for that. I certainly like not going to jail, so we don't do any of that. I can, of course, share those with people who I have deputized to handle those because given the sheer number, I can't handle them all myself. So what is the maximum income limitation? Well, it's changed over the years. When it started, it was $35,000. In 1999, it was increased to 40. In 2004, it went up to 45,000. 2006, 50,000. 2008, it went to 55,000. And then in 2018, it went to $65,000 where it sits currently. So how does that reflect inflation adjustments over the years? Well, it actually reflects it pretty well. So here's a chart showing where the maximum income limitation was by statute, and where if we took that original 1994 number and adjusted it by the same CPI figures that are used in the property tax extension limitation law, and all the rest of the property code uses this same index, and we apply it to that, we would see the relationship is pretty close. The number where you see it going above, that would be for the 2023 year, because that reflects 2022 income. And that's for the bill to be paid in 2024. It just now peaked above it again. And that's usually around the time the General Assembly decides to take a look at the threshold, which, as you'll see coming up, is actually happening during the veto session. So on the next page is a chart showing from tax year 2004 to 2021. So it doesn't show 2022 because we aren't even done yet reviewing the thousands of applications that come in. So you can see in the first column of the year, after that, the maximum income limit for each year. And then the next column is senior freeze granted. So this is the number of people who met the qualifications income-wise. And you can see those amounts have generally gone up. Our peak amount was in 2020. I'll give you a reason why that was higher than the others in a little bit. The next column is the difference from the prior year in the senior freeze amounts granted. And you can see it sometimes goes up, sometimes goes down. The next column after that was senior freeze reductions. Now, this is going to be a little different from the ones granted in that the senior freeze reductions are the people who actually got a benefit on their tax bill. The reason that amount is different is because sometimes people apply when their assessment did not go up. So if the first year you qualify, the prior year's assessment was 60,000 and your assessment is now 90,000, you get a $30,000 exemption. But if in the next year it drops to 75,000, your benefit is going to be $15,000 of assessment reduction. If it drops from 60,000 to 50,000, it goes to zero. Now, it doesn't freeze you at that base number. So that's another reason why the freeze is not really a freeze. It only counts if it's going up. It will not count going down. But when it does go down, that if it goes down to 50,000 and then goes back up to 60 in the next year, 50,000 becomes the new base. So your assessment increase from 50,000 is where it counts. So where we see is it's always going to be a little bit less because there's always people who qualify, but their assessment has not increased. The biggest example of a difference there would be 2013. Remember when property values actually started dropping? That's the nadir of property value decreases in Kane County. And we can see that 8,128 actually filed and qualified, but only 2,328 actually got a reduction in that year. Now, the next is the percent delta in those reductions from the prior year. The second to the last column is the median exemption amount. So this would be the amount of property value in the middle between the two that people got or got removed and was not taxed. And if you applied a typical 9% tax saving, that last column is where that median tax savings would be. Now, a few variances.
Is that a EAV value?
The last column, Mr. Chaparro?
Yeah, is that when the exemption amount is based on the 1/3?
Correct. These are all based on assessed values, not fair cash value. So in the next slide, we have some anomalies that happened. 2017 was the beginning of requiring tax returns. We actually saw a drop in the number of applications. We had some very angry taxpayers calling us up saying that they shouldn't be required to prove that their actual income was below the threshold. And one gentleman talked to me for about a half an hour and then said, well, I'll tell you, I'm just going to not apply then. Okay. I'm not sure why he thought that was going to influence me to change my mind. But we found that most people appreciate the idea that we verify these, because every exemption that we give out does not mean government gets more or less money. Every exemption that we give out means other taxpayers pay more. So low-income non-seniors will see their taxes increase. In general, right now, countywide taxes are about 1% higher than they would be because of these changes. Now, in that case, that means if their tax bill is $5,000, they're paying about $50 more to account for this exemption. $10,000, they're paying about $100 more. Now, is that a good idea or not? That is a decision for the policymakers. That is not a decision for my office. So as long as the General Assembly decides that's the policy, we'll certainly apply that in the county assessment office. Another anomaly was in 2020, where because of COVID, we decided having a whole bunch of senior citizens have to show up and spend time in a crowded space was probably not the best plan. So I drafted a bill and the General Assembly agreed to it and put it into law, permitting for the 2020 year that we automatically renew it. So we could certainly take new exemptions, but anybody who got it in 2019 would automatically get it in 2020. And so that's why you saw an increase of about 1,000 parcels granted. And you saw an increase of more than 1,000 who actually got a reduction in those years. So that gives us a good idea of what happened if we don't check. We'd see much larger amounts, because these people that are getting the exemption are not the same people in every year. Sometimes people fall into it. Sometimes they fall out. They fall back into it in a future year. That is a normal process to see. So what happens when we increase the maximum income threshold? Well, we can see historically that's happened 3 times over this period. We can see in 2006, when there was a $5,000 increase, that resulted in a 5% increase in applications. In 2008, a $5,000 increase resulted in nearly a 10% increase. In 2018, a $10,000 increase resulted in a 20% increase in my office. Now, this is where the "it ain't free" comes in. There is a cost. It's not in revenue to the county. It's in personnel dollars, because those are things that we still have to process. We still have to audit every single one to make sure those applications are coming in correctly. And there is always more work to do with that. Now, if you double back to my original report, I didn't spend time talking about it, but I also talked about when we have a general assessment year, how there's an increase at Board of Review. And given what's going on in the economy, I'm expecting a more than double the amount of assessment complaints next year. When we see that, to have that in the same year would mean a pretty substantial crunch in personnel hours in my office. So if we have both of these in the same year, either one of these, we're going to have to account for. Both of these, we're going to have to think about, do we need to increase personnel in order to administer these things, especially if they're all happening at the same time. Now, with that, let's go to House Bill 5824. House Bill 5824 was introduced yesterday. It was actually filed a few weeks ago, but it was introduced. It's on first reading and referred to the Rules Committee yesterday. It's sponsored by Representative Wheeler. This is in the lame duck session, so we'll know in the next couple of weeks whether this goes through. Now, there's no co-sponsors yet. Don't know if that will change. Typically, bills pick up co-sponsors as they go along. It's not unusual to see a bill not have co-sponsors the day after first reading. Now, what this bill would do is increase the maximum income limitation beginning in the 2023 tax year to $73,700. And I'm guessing that was a 1-year inflation adjustment. It doesn't match the long-term number, but I don't know that it really necessarily needs to. It would also create an automatic indexing to inflation beginning with the 2024 year. I would note that index to inflation is only if inflation goes up. If we experience deflation, this would not result in a lowering of this threshold. It's probably good to be forward thinking about that, because when we dealt with PTEL, nobody ever put into what happens if property values decline and people were kind of unsure of what to do on some of that, or what if the inflation results negative in regards to PTEL. So it's good at least that that's addressed. Now, the timing on this bill is not actually bad. It's actually preferable. The normal course is bills are introduced in January. They have hearings in March and April. They get enacted on the last day of May because that's the way the General Assembly operates. Then the governor signs the bill sometime in August. That kind of an increase, that schedule is devastating for us. Here's why. We send out an application for these every year. We send it out in March. The timing of that is important. If you send it out when people are filing their 1040s, they have the information. You send it out too early, they put the form aside and they forget to file. You send it out too late, they won't remember where they put their 1040s and they won't have that information. And then they'll get their tax bills later. They will then file, we'll have to do certificates of error, and actual refunds will have to be issued, lowering everybody's taxable revenue, or the revenue that all the governments earn. So having that in March is really important, because if people know they don't meet the income limitation, they won't file where they might. You bring that in August. We now redo that mailing, which right now is about 36,000 senior identified parcels in the county. And yes, we have done break-even studies to see at what point we break even on the mailing costs, and it's not very high. So we could discuss that if you're interested in it. But having that change be in the fall is so bad that the General Assembly, almost every time they've done this, have agreed to delay it 1 year. So if this doesn't happen in either the veto session now or in the lame duck session in January and gets signed by then this needs to really wait till the 2024 taxable year. Now, whether it's a good idea policy-wise, that's for something else. My counsel is simply on the administration side. So let's take a look at where that increase would be. You can see where the amount is on the screen. This would show where the statutory minimum would change if this bill were to be adopted, relative to where inflation puts it as calculated from the very beginning of the process. And you see that looks a lot like the increase in 2016, where it's going to be well above inflation. Eventually inflation catches up with this. This would not be inconsistent with the long-term trend. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about these background information. And obviously, for more information on exemptions, please visit KaneCountyAssessments.org.
Thank you. I know that the county assessor or the township assessor's office in Elgin has been very responsive to helping people whenever they have issues. I'm sure the other assessor's office do the same.
Absolutely. The township assessors are valued partners in this process. If they didn't do what they did at the township level, I'd be coming to you with a budget request for a lot more people.
I don't have any questions,
Bates,
shockingly. Ms.
Bates,
Bates?
please. So as we raise the exemption level, possibly to 73,000, but as people's incomes rise, possibly to 73,000, or, they are going up, these bills do not, I believe, change the amount of taxes that we receive, nor put in a new burden, a bigger burden on non-seniors, because it's like all boats are rising at the same time. The amount we pay, the amount of exemptions. Is that correct?
Your first point is correct. That would not change the amount of tax revenue. The second amount is incorrect. Give you an example. During the last year, we had around $150 million removed from the tax rolls because of the senior freeze. But about 10 years ago, that number was in the like around $20 million. So what that does is it raises the overall tax rate. So if the senior freeze didn't exist, somebody with a $5,000 tax bill would actually pay $50 less. Now, whether that amount is a good one, that's again is a policy decision. But I don't think it would be fair to say there is no impact on non-low income seniors. There is some, whether it's an acceptable exchange, that's up to the General Assembly.
Oh, okay, may I ask my question in a different way?
Of course.
As the exemptions rise and incomes rise, the same number of people are paying the same taxes. It's indexing, correct?
No, because some get removed from the tax rolls altogether. Remember, there's not just a senior citizen exemption freeze. There's also a general exemption and a senior exemption. Those are also increasing next year. So we're currently to $8,000 for both. So we're currently seeing another $5,000 coming off the property tax rolls for every low-income senior household, even if nothing is done. So what that is going to do is going to raise the overall tax rate higher than it would have been. That means other people are going to be paying more.
But that is not the same thing as the senior exemption for property taxes. Those are other exemptions.
Yes, they are. Every exemption has that effect.
Okay, but that's not the one that we're talking about right now, House Bill 5824. So in other words, House Bill 5824 will not raise taxes on non-exempt taxpayers because.
No, that is not correct.
Okay, I did think of a question. Does a senior have to file a federal tax form in order to get in order to apply for the senior tax exemption?
No, because not every senior is required to. If they are not required to file a federal tax form, we do require their 1099s to be included. For instance, you'll get a 1099 SSI from the Social Security Administration. We do have some people who claim we have no income, and nobody gets a 1099. I'm not sure how they're paying their bills now. But we do have an affidavit that we have developed working with the state's attorney's office, where we have that all adult members of the household would have to sign saying, I have no income, recognizing that if that turns out to not be true, there is a recovery mechanism that would be in place for filing that false affidavit.
Okay, thank you. Well, I've asked for this information, and believe me, as is your reputation, you are very thorough, and I really appreciate this explanation. And I see that Ms. Gums is online, so we'll move ahead with her
Yes,
committee.
thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Super smart guy. Can learn a lot from this one.
Thank you. May I have a motion unanimous to put reports on file?
Leonard so moves.
Okay, Leonard moves. Any objection? Thank you. In honor of Mr. Kenyon, may I have a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn, Shepro.
Second?
Leonard second.
Second, Leonard. All in favor?
Aye.